Hey there, First Wavers. Today we're going to talk about some early punk rock bands that set the stage for the punk rock movement we know today. I'm New Wave Joe, and this is Catch the First Wave. When you think about punk rock, what bands come to mind? The Sex Pistols, the Ramones, even Blink-182. On today's show, we're going to talk about a group of punk rock bands that got their start in the 1970s, but never received the recognition they deserved. Most of these bands never even recorded their music, officially anyway. But now, as a result of social media, you can catch some of their stuff on YouTube and even on Spotify. But before we jump into talking about the bands, I want to set the stage a little bit. In the 1970s, if you wanted to hear punk rock music, you basically had to go out to hear it. You had to go to the clubs where they were playing, places like the Mask in LA, or CBGB's in New York, or the Roxy in the UK. These bands were not played on the radio, not commercial radio anyway, and in some instances, maybe college radio played them. Remember, this was all pre-internet, and it wasn't even until 1981 when MTV came out. So these bands, well, they just simply didn't have much of an audience other than those who saw them. You may have also heard about them through reading fanzines or early punk rock magazines like Slash. I also want to say that a lot of early punk rock bands were not nearly as male and white as they are today. In fact, there were a fair amount of female-fronted bands, as well as bands of color that were putting out some pretty amazing music. I'm also not going to really focus on where punk rock music got its start, because quite frankly, I don't care. Whether it was New York or the UK, I just know that it got its start, and that's all that matters to me. The first band I want to talk about is the Screamers. Now, this electro-punk band got their start in 1975 and ended in about 1981.
There's something below the surface, deep inside me. It makes me nervous.
What makes the Screamers so unique as a band was their unconventional, theoretical stage performances, their iconic Screamers logo, their intellectual lyrics, and the way they manipulated their musical sound. Up to that point, no one had actually created sound like this. Many consider the Screamers one of the best unrecorded punk bands in history. The Screamers never officially released any music, but they did put out some bootleg demos and record some videos at the Target studio in LA. The next band I want to talk about is called the Brat. This band came together in 1978 and ended in 1985. Now, this band was part of the East LA punk rock movement, or the Chicano punk rock movement. The Brat's music was really reflective of the times. It focused on issues that were affecting the Mexican-American communities at that period of time. Initially, the Brat only released one LP consisting of 6 songs, but in 2017 the band reunited and released the CD Straight Out of East LA, which consisted of 21 songs. You can find this CD on streaming services like Spotify now. The next band I'd like to feature are the Los Illegals. This band started in 1979 and they're actually still together today. Los Illegals are considered one of the most important Chicano-based punk bands to come out of the LA scene. The band was one of the first bands from the Club Vex scene to sign with a major record label. Club Vex was started on the east side as a place to give Chicano punk bands a place to play. Los Illegals released 2 albums, Internal Exile in 1983 and the highly praised CD Concrete Blonde. Some years later, the band started to play out and tour with more popular bands like Berlin or the Motels, but really this was an East Side punk rock band who was very formative in helping to create the Chicano punk rock movement, and that's what they're most known for. The final LA band I want to focus on today are the Bags. This band came together in 1977 and basically broke up in around 1981.
Kiss or fist, knowing the answers to one song question, of opportunity missed.
The band was initially formed by Alicia Armendariz and Patricia Morrison, who actually met while they were waiting in line to see Elton John guest star on The Cher Show. Initially, they called the band Femme Fatale, but later changed the name to The Bags. The funny thing is, the name of the band actually came from a gimmick that they used to do on stage, in which they put grocery bags over their heads. In 1978, the band released their only single, Survive, on Danger House Records. Shortly after, Pat Bagg left the band and they kind of renamed it the Alice Bagg Band. The band was later featured in the 1981 documentary The Decline of Western Civilization. In 2007, the band released a compilation album called All Bagged Up, The Collected Works from 1977 to 1980. The first New York City band I want to talk about is synth punk band Suicide. Suicide came together in 1979 and stayed intermittently together until about 2016. It was initially formed by vocalist Alan Vega and instrumentalist Martin Rev. Suicide has been recognized as being one of the most influential musical bands of their era.
It's one voice and one synthesizer. We had no idea what we were in for. The single most intense song I've ever heard in my life is contained on this record. It's called Frankie Teardrop. Try it. It is easily the most intense song you will ever hear. It blew our young minds so substantially that all we could do is laugh and make fun of the record for the rest of the night because it made us so nervous.
Their debut album entitled Suicide came out in 1977 and has been described by Entertainment Weekly as a landmark of electronic music, while Alt Music stated that it provided the blueprint for post-punk, synth-pop, and industrial rock. The next individual I want to talk about is Jayne County, the vocalist for Wayne County and the Electric Chairs.
Alright. Know there's some people that just living the day, that are walking around, but they got nothing to say.
Jayne left her hometown of Dallas, Georgia in 1968 and moved to New York City. She appeared as an actress at Andy Warhol's Factory and had a brief association with David Bowie in the 70s. She also played Lounge Lizard in the punk rock film Jubilee. In 2014, Jayne left New York City and settled in Atlanta, where she formed a new band called Electric Queers. She was an influence to many notable musicians at the time, David Bowie and Pete Burns, as well as bands like the Ramones. Over the years, Jayne released 18 studio albums and appeared in over 15 films. The next band I want to talk about are the Slits. The Slits formed in London in 1976 after two of the members, Palmolive and Kate Korris, approached Ari Up about forming an all-girl punk band. Ironically enough, the conversation they had about forming a band started the night they all met at a Patti Smith show. The next day, they had their first practice session.
It is about fucking guys fucking us about, and we tell them to fuck off.
And we just get started, and we just started, and we have a life.
Things quickly fell together for the band, and in 1977, they were asked to join the White Riot Tour, along with the Buzzcocks, the Jam, and the Clash. The Slits were one of the first all-female punk rock bands doing things their own way. And unlike some of their male counterparts, they did not have any mentors or people to follow or get advice from. In 1979, the band released their debut album, Cut, on Island Records. The album reached number 30 on the UK charts at the time, but today is considered to be one of the greatest British albums of all time. Following this, they released two additional albums, Return of the Giant Slits in 1981 and Trapped Animal in 2009. Being one of the only all-female punk bands in the 1970s isn't the only thing that made the Slits unique. Another remarkable factor that solidified the Slits' mark on the punk rock music scene was their incorporation of reggae into their music. They were one of the first punk rock bands to do this. Today, the Slits are considered one of the most influential bands in punk rock history and are credited as being an inspiration to the Riot Grrrl movement of the 1990s. I just want to say that punk rock was not just about the music. It was about a movement. It was about an energy. It was about a style of dress. It was about an attitude.
one thing again. They're taking them in. It's like a race at the top because they will have it wrong. They don't care who gets the as long as they get along. Politics, that's their life.
Yesterday was a party. Yesterday drinks were strong. Yesterday was a party.
It's all the same, and you're still waiting.